In the mid-1990s, the blueprint for the largest information company on Earth was born not from a business plan, but from a student's abstract curiosity. Today, we're not just telling the story of Google, we're going to unpack a whole way of thinking. It's a systematic commitment to these huge exponential leaps, and it's all fueled by the kind of curiosity that doesn't ask, is this profitable, but instead, is this even possible? This, right here, is the 10x curiosity rule.
Just let that sink in for a second. This whole thing wasn't cooked up in some boardroom. It didn't start with market analysis or a fancy pitch deck for venture capitalists. No. The idea that would literally change how we interact with information, it began as an intellectual puzzle, something pursued for its own sake in a Stanford dorm room. And that simple, powerful origin story, that's the key we're unlocking today.
So where did this all begin? Well, it started with a single foundational insight. An idea so simple, so elegant when you look back on it, that it seems obvious now. But back then, it was completely revolutionary. It was the answer to a problem that most people didn't even realize was a problem yet.
Okay, so picture the mid-90s. The World Wide Web was this chaotic, sprawling new frontier. It was a digital Wild West. No map, no sheriff. Finding anything was a total mess of these clunky directories and really basic search engines that were super easy to trick. For most of us, it was a novelty, but for Larry Page, this PhD student at Stanford, it was a fascinating puzzle. He wasn't thinking about business at all. He was obsessed with a purely academic question. What is the hidden structure of this new world? What holds it all together, and what do those connections actually mean? His goal was simple, just to map it. So while he's trying to map this digital chaos, Page has this breakthrough moment. He realizes a link isn't just a connection, it's a vote of confidence, it's an endorsement. And here's the kicker, not all votes are created equal. A link from a really respected source, say a major university's website, that carries way more weight than a link from some random personal blog. This simple, powerful idea, which he called PageRank, that was the moment his abstract curiosity turned into a world-changing invention. It was the key to organizing all of the world's information based on relevance and authority, not just counting keywords.
A mindset that can come up with an idea like that doesn't just appear out of thin air. It's forged. And to really understand Larry Page's relentless drive for these huge world-changing goals, we have to look at two powerful and kind of contradictory forces that shaped him from a really young age.
His childhood was just steeped in technology and big ideas. Growing up with two computer science professors for parents, his house was always full of this chaotic, stimulating debate. But you know what? It was his formal education that really wired his brain to solve problems in a totally different way.
Okay, so on one hand, you've got the incredible freedom of his Montessori education. This philosophy, it's not just about learning with your hands, it's about giving students these huge, uninterrupted chunks of time to just chase their own projects, to follow their curiosity down whatever rabbit hole they find. That's what taught him the immense value of deep, focused work. But then, on the other hand, you have this much darker influence, the cautionary tale of Nikola Tesla. Page was fascinated by Tesla's genius, but he was absolutely horrified that such a brilliant inventor died broke, having lost control of his own incredible inventions. This gave him this deep-seated fear. Genius without ownership is, in the end, powerless.
So this combination of freedom and fear, it created his two core beliefs. From Montessori, he learned that real breakthroughs need protected, uninterrupted time for deep thought. And from Tesla, he learned the non-negotiable rule. If you're going to create something that changes the world, you absolutely have to maintain strategic control over it. This foundation didn't just prepare him to have big ideas, it prepared him to build fortresses around them.
And that foundation, it leads us right to his core philosophy, the mindset that's really at the heart of his success. It's a simple but radical filter for deciding what's actually worth your time, and it's called the 10x rule.
For Larry Page, aiming for a 10% improvement is basically a death sentence. And why is that? Well, because if you're trying to improve something by just 10%, you are, by definition, competing with everybody else. You're fighting in a super crowded space, just making tiny little tweaks to something that already exists. Think about all the MP3 players that came after the iPod. They were maybe 10% cheaper or had 10% more storage, but they were all playing the same game. A 10% goal just guarantees you'll always be part of the herd.
But aiming for a tenfold, a 10x improvement, that changes the game completely. It's not just that it's harder, it's a fundamentally different way of thinking. You can't get to 10x by just working a little bit harder or optimizing what you're already doing. A 10x goal is so audacious that it forces you to just throw out the rulebook and start from scratch. It forces you out of the competition and into a category all by yourself. It's the difference between trying to build a faster horse and inventing the car. The first pillar of this 10x thinking is a concept called additionality. It's a really simple filter for impact, and the question behind it is profound. It's not just, can we do this? It's, if we don't do this, will it happen anyway? The goal is to only take on these billion-person problems that nobody else is really in a position to solve. It's all about making a contribution that is truly additional to the world, something that just wouldn't exist otherwise. And the second pillar is this almost reckless disregard for what seems impossible. When you set a 10x goal, like, say, digitizing every book ever written or blanketing the entire globe with internet from balloons, the normal constraints like budget, time, or how things are done just become irrelevant. Page's whole argument is that your only real constraint should be the fundamental laws of physics. Everything else, money, regulations, the technology we have today, that's all just a problem to be solved. And that's what frees your mind to explore truly radical solutions.
Now, a philosophy this ambitious is pretty useless if it's just a motivational poster on the wall, right? The real genius of Larry Page was his ability to turn this 10x mindset from an abstract idea into a concrete, repeatable system, an engine for innovation that he built right into the fabric of his company.
See, this wasn't just a belief he had, it was a practice he actively engineered. Page understood that the kind of deep, creative thinking you need for 10x breakthroughs, it doesn't just happen by accident, especially in a busy company. It has to be protected, it has to be nurtured and systematized. So he created these specific habits and corporate structures that were designed to shield that deep thinking from the day-to-day grind of just running a business.
And the system kind of evolved in 3 stages. It started out as a personal habit, the ritual. Drawing on that Montessori background, Page would famously carve out these non-negotiable blocks of thinking time in his calendar just to chew on complex problems. Then he scaled it up into a company-wide policy, the rule. This was the legendary 20% time, which let Google employees spend 1 day a week on their own curiosity projects. I mean, things like Gmail and AdSense were born out of this freedom. And finally, he gave it a permanent home, the lab. Google X was created as a dedicated moonshot factory, totally separate from the core business, for the sole purpose of chasing those 10x goals.
And this quote, it just says it all. Google X wasn't some R&D department for the main company. Its entire reason for being was to swing for the fences, to work on things like self-driving cars and wearable computing way before anyone considered them mainstream. It was the ultimate institutionalization of the 10x rule, a structure literally built to protect radical ideas from the gravitational pull of playing it safe.
So, this brings us to the ultimate expression of Page's philosophy. As Google grew into this global behemoth, he faced a new 10x problem. How do you keep a trillion-dollar company nimble and innovative and still focused on the next moonshot? Well, his answer was to completely reinvent the idea of a modern corporation.
This is really the final stage of his evolution. That curious academic who just wanted to map the web became the visionary CEO who realized that the biggest threat to his company's future was its own success. He saw that the immense gravity of the main search business could literally crush these fragile, ambitious new ventures. So he applied his core principles at the biggest scale possible.
The journey started with that PageRank insight back in '96, which led to founding Google, and then creating the Google X moonshot factory. But the final step, in 2015, was the most radical of all, Alphabet Inc. He created a holding company where Google was just one piece, yeah, the biggest piece, but it was part of a larger collection of independent bets on the future, each with its own CEO and its own high-risk, high-reward mission.
So, what's his lasting legacy? It's so much more than search or Android. It's the institutionalization of technological audacity itself. With Alphabet, he created a corporate structure that was purpose-built to fund and protect these high-risk, long-term projects, from Waymo tackling the billion-person problem of transportation safety to Verily tackling human health. More than anyone, he cemented the idea that the greatest competitive advantage you can have comes from having the courage to solve the biggest problems for the most people.
So from a dorm room to a global alphabet of companies, what's the lesson for us in all this? How do we actually apply the 10x curiosity rule in our own lives?
The core message here is the challenge to every single one of us. Stop settling for incremental improvements. Stop asking, how can I make this 10% better? That question keeps you trapped, competing with everyone else on the exact same terms. The real question, the 10x question, is what would it take to make this 10 times better? Now that question forces you to throw out what you already know and invent a completely new path.
At his core, Larry Page really remained that visionary from the dorm room, just driven by these abstract intellectual puzzles. His greatest achievement wasn't a search engine, it was turning that academic curiosity into a global standard for innovation. He created a legacy defined by exponential growth, and it all stemmed from that simple 10x curiosity rule. So I'll just leave you with this. What's the goal in your life or in your work that if you actually pursued it would force you to become something more? What is your 10x goal?
Because that right there is the only path to true exponential growth. Set a goal so audacious it makes who you are today obsolete. Thanks for watching.